everyone, I hope you all are doing good. Welcome to the Analyst, dated 19th of October, where we will take up the current affair analysis of major articles published in the Hindu and Indian Express. So let's look into the major highlights of the day. With only 12 Indian origin scientists being awarded the Nobel Prize since its inception, we will analyze what are the reasons and how India can end this Nobel drought. Second, we will analyze why RBI has prohibited 4 NBFCs from approving and disbursing the loans, especially regarding the predatory digital lending, along with simplifying 5 other important articles with prelims pointers, also providing you a handout for quick revision and 5 MCQs in the end for developing your prelims aptitude. So happy learning. So our first article has been derived from the explained section of Indian Express with the name of India and the Science Nobels, a very important read. Now, as we know that the Nobel Prize season has kicked off with many stalwarts being awarded with the Nobel Prize, it also brings to highlight a very stark reality that India is facing with regards to getting this prize. Since its inception, that is 1901, only 12 people, only 12 individuals of Indian origin have been accorded with the Nobel Prize, and even starking is the fact that out of those 12, only 5 were Indians. And what is more alarming is that only 1 out of these 12 has been an Indian who has been accorded a Nobel Prize in the field of science. Who is this person? The great C.V. Raman, who was accorded Nobel Prize in the year 1930 for discovering Raman effect. So we will analyze what are the causes and what are the way forward so that this Nobel drought can be ended in India. To begin with, first of all, we will talk about the basics, how and what led to the discovery and the establishment of this Nobel Prizes. So the establishment, the person behind Nobel Prize is Alfred Nobel, a chemist, an engineer, and also inventor of dynamite, inventor of some of the most explosive gunpowders, who in his living testament and in his living will signed in 1895 called for establishment of Nobel Prizes from the money that he had. The first Nobel Prize therefore was given 6 years later, that is in 1901. So we are counting not from 1895 but 1901. I hope that is clear. But now we know that the person's fund would have also exhausted. So now it is funded, it is taken care, and the trusteeship is given to Sweden's central bank with the name of Sveriges Riksbank. Now, our article highlights some of these striking facts. First of all, it's now been 94 years since the Indian working in India has become a laureate in the sciences. The last one accorded to C.V. Raman, Sir C.V. Raman in 1930. Some of the other scientists have also got the Nobel Prize in science. For example, Hargobind Khurana in medicine, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar in physics, Sir Venkat Raman Ramakrishnan in chemistry. But when they were accorded, they were not having the Indian citizenship. So they were the Indian origin scientists definitely, but they were working outside the India and none of them were Indian citizen at that time. So what is it with the Indian ecosystem that such a great lacuna is observed in our research, in our fundamental research in science? Now let's see the process through which a person is accorded the Nobel Prizes. The stage 1 is the nomination process. Nomination process is initiated by the Nobel Committee. Nomination forms, about 3,000 forms are floated to about 3,000 people, and this is done in the month of September every year, and then it must be returned by 31st of January the next year, and then Nobel Committee selects about 300 candidates, filter out 300 candidates from these 3,000 nomination papers, and then the other nomination records, whoever were nominated, these nomination records are kept under seal for next 50 years. Now, what is the selection process, which is a stage 2? Once a nomination is done and 300 candidates have been shortlisted, now the recommendations move to the subject matter experts who upon analyzing accords the votes, and it goes with a system of majority voting, 50% plus 1, and it is immediately followed by the announcement. And also please remember, the announcement of Nobel Prizes cannot be challenged in any court or anywhere. Now, who accords these prizes? It depends upon the genres, which means for chemistry, physics, and economic science, it is accorded by the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. For physiology or medicine, it is the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute. For literature, it is a Swedish Academy, and most importantly, for the peace, it is a Norwegian Nobel Committee. This question has been asked multiple times in several examinations. Now, please remember, at every year, maximum of 3 laureates across maximum of 2 distinct works can be chosen for each award. That is a very important fact for prelims. Second, it can only be given to the individuals. Exception is there for the peace, because we know that certain institutions or even countries can get the peace prize. For example, the United Nations Peacekeeping Mission, and can you name some other? Try to comment that. And also, the announcement is always made in the first 2 weeks of October, as is evident in this year itself. Okay. Now, the award ceremonies get conducted generally on December 10th. That is the day when the Alfred Nobel died. And then we see these ceremonies being held in 2 places. For all the other 4 domains, it's the Stockholm Concert Hall, which is chosen in Sweden for according prizes in all the science disciplines and also in the literature discipline, but only in the peace discipline. The Nobel Peace Prize is given in Norwegian Nobel Committee in Oslo. Okay, so kindly remember these facts, very useful for prelims given the changing trend. Now let's dive deeper into the news. As you can see, the Nobel Peace Prize winners from India, it's not including Abhijit Banerjee, who's also an Indian origin scientist, but the first one to get this award was Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore in 1913, a Nobel laureate in literature. Then C.V. Raman, the first and the only Indian scientist, not Indian origin, but Indian citizen scientist to get a Nobel laureate in science field and physics field. Then there is Hargobind Khurana, US citizen of Indian origin, Mother Teresa, Indian citizen of Albanian origin, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar, US citizen of Indian origin, Amartya Sen, Kailash Satyarthi, and Venkatraman Ramakrishnan. So you can see that over here, 3 people are belonging to Indian origin, though they have been Indian citizens previously. So how many of them are there belonging to science categories? Only 5. But the editorial highlights that there have been multiple contenders, as we know, in the form of nominations. Nominations form gets out after 50 years, which means that the names of nominated candidates are not made public until 50 years. That is for physics and chemistries. Data is only available until 1970. And for medicine, it is available only until 1953. Now, this is also very important to know who have been nominated, because the nominees themselves have been stalwarts in sciences and research and development. So, knowing their names would also bolster our image in the global front. And we can assess that while having a lot of nominations of our names, we are still not getting the award. So, what could be the reasons? So, it also highlighted that 35 odd Indians figure have been in the nomination list so far, which has been made public since until 1970. And 6 scientists among them are Meghnad Saha, Homi J. Bhabha, Satyendranath Bose, nominated for physics. Please remember these names. There are G. N. Ramachandran and T. Seshadri, nominated for chemistry prize. Upendranath Brahmachari, nominated for prize in physiology or medicine. Except for Ramachandran sir, all of them have been nominated more than once and still not accorded the Nobel Prize. Now you can see their range of disciplines and what they contributed into. This is for your own read and this is very important. Please remember that Satyendranath Bose, who has been very instrumental in discovering the 4th state of matter, the bosons, etc., is also not accorded the prize till yet, but has been nominated along with all these prominent figures. Now, let's analyze the possible reasons as to why, despite having very sound mind, very genius landscape in our country, we are not getting the Nobel Prizes at that scale. So, some of the reasons highlighted in this particular editorial is inadequate attention to the basic research, low levels of public funding, obstructive, unimaginative bureaucracy, absence of incentives, and opportunities for private research and all-round decay in research capabilities of universities. Don't worry, we will break them down into multiple dimensions for you to understand it better with examples. First and foremost is the historical factor. We know that the inception happened in 1901 and India has been under the colonial rule since 1947. So just think about the research and development in fundamental science that is going on in today's free India. It is still subpar. So think about the amount of funding and the amount of support we would have gotten from a colonial government, and therefore a lot of Indian scientists, though they were working in their field, were not getting duly recognized. So therefore all these years were effectively wasted, including scientists like Hargobind Khurana, who were doing exceptional work in their field but not getting duly recognized until he moved to the other country. So these are the historical factors. Second is the focus on development. So ever since we got the independence in 1947, there also we saw that there have been less investments from government in terms of research and development, especially in fundamental sciences, because most of the money was going for alleviation of poverty, for strengthening the agriculture sector, for the primary sector, and for strengthening the social sector or the social fabric of India. So that is where most of our focus and money was going. So definitely which sector was compromising? The science and the innovation part. Next is recognition and the global influence. Now think about this. How many foreigners do you see coming to India for pursuing research and development? And how many Indians do you see going to abroad for pursuing their research goals? Of course, there is a huge disparity because of the very narrow and shallow development and ecosystem, the research and development ecosystem of India. This is also because of the lacunas in funding not just from the government sector but also from private sector. Let us see the contrast. In the case of USA, they invest about $600 billion for their R&D. In India, it's just $10 billion, which is just 0.7% of our overall GDP. Very, very less than some of the competitive economies, for example, China, who invest 4 times as that of ours in terms of their GDP contribution for the R&D purposes. So this is why our global influence is low, and therefore our global recognition as somebody or a country who's producing a lot of researchers is also quite poor. Next is the educational system. So we are marred by an educational system which is affected by rote learning, the habit and the attitude of rote learning that is given since a childhood. We know that the schools are the nurseries of humankind. If you're nurturing the student, if you're nurturing the children to rote learn, to perform, to prepare for government jobs or to prepare for the engineering jobs and the medicine jobs only, they will not be focusing and appreciating the researches in the fundamental sciences which is required for the advancement of the society. But it requires patience, it requires perseverance, and definitely a lot of support in terms of capital, in terms of money, in terms of motivation from the society, from the government at large. Because of these issues, we are also fundamentally cracked at the education system, where lack of investment into the fundamental science is happening and more investments into lucrative jobs like engineering is there. Next is the cultural and the social dynamics. Now this one is also highlighted by the editorial that there could be certain regional and racial biases also. How? Let's see. See, it highlights that there is a US and Europe dominance seen in the Nobel Prizes. Do you know that of all the 653 laureates in science field till now, 150 have been Jews, but not coming from Israel. In fact, if you talk about Israel as a country, only 4 Israelis have won the prizes so far, and all of them for chemistry, which means definitely there is a regional bias going on. It is also highlighted in some other cases. For example, let's say we are low on research and development, but what about China? Heavily investing in R&D, and still China, which has 4 times more researchers per million population than India, has just 3 science laureates. And similarly, for all the other countries belonging to Asia, Africa, and South America, in fact, it is highlighted that researchers from only 9 countries outside of North America and Europe have won prizes in science, the majority of them clocked by Japan. Okay, so this also highlights that there might be a political issue, there might be a regional or racial biases in the nomination processes as well. So these could be the possible reasons due to which we might not be getting our groundbreaking Nobel researches. So how can we improve it, and what can India do to end this drought? First and foremost is to work on the school levels, at the education level, to emphasize on the STEM education. When we are saying STEM education, not just on medicine and engineering field, but to promote promote the researches for fundamental sciences. How can you do that? By incentivizing the students. We already have got incubator cells, for example, Atal Tinkering Labs, Atal Innovation Missions, to promote the culture of startup. But in order to expedite the research and development in fundamental sciences, we need to change the attitude and the mindset of our children so that they move from rote learning to risk-based, research-based learning. This can be promoted by some of the competitive examinations, for example, the NTSE National Talent Search Examination, the KVPY examination. We used to give it in the 10th and 8th standard. So these examinations could instill a sense or an appreciation of the research sector amongst the bright minds of India. Next is to address the brain drain. Now we have read about Venkatraman, Chandrasekhar and Hargobind Khurana. They only got the recognition once they moved out of India and they started working with the other collaborators at the international level. They also renounced the Indian citizenship for that matter. So this is actually a classic case of brain drain. This is also happening because of the collapsing and the very narrow ecosystem which is supporting R&D in India. So here we can see, with a contrast, we can see that while there is over 4,000 scientists per million people in states like USA and UK, in India it is just 40 scientists per million. So what we can do, we have to bolster the research capacities. How to bolster the research capacities? To make it more lucrative so that the Indian brain can stay over here. For that, we would be requiring a lot of funding, not just government dependent, but also from private entities. So there should be collaborative projects. Next is to foster international collaborations, because we have seen that it's very rarely that a Nobel Prize is being accorded for one particular person in one particular field. We see a little collaboration over there. Let's say Abhijit Banerjee, a person from Indian origin, also shared his prize with Esther Duflo, right? So international collaborations are very important to harness the best from our country and the best from their country to harness the best results in science and tech, because we know that ek se bhale do. So therefore, multiple research collaborations can be conducted. For example, the 1000 Scholar Program of Government of India. And last but not the least, we need to really develop the culture of risk taking for us to create innovations in the field of fundamental science, because this has always been a prerequisite for innovation. So we need to deal away with the bureaucratic constraints and need to go for more bolder experimentation. So here is a question, prelims practice question. You can attempt it and write the answer in the comment section. And here is a mains practice question, a mains PYQ for you relating to the discovery made by Dr. C.V. Raman. Now let's move to the next topic. Our next topic is on the digital lending and the NBFCs and the recent RBI lash down on them. So what is the context? That RBI recently has barred about 4 NBFCs because they have been reported to be indulging in usurious pricing of loans and high-handed recovery methods. And mostly they were doing it through the means of digital lending. So we will also see the ecosystem and the regulatory atmosphere of digital lending in India. So first of all, let's simplify the news for you. So RBI recently has barred the 4 NBFCs broadly on the ground of violating the regulations led forward by RBI in terms of digital lending. These are the names of these NBFCs which are banned, and they have been non-compliant in the following cases. First and foremost is violating the disclosure requirement, disclosure in terms of the fees that they are charging from the customer and the interest rate that they are imposing upon them and the extortive terms and conditions that they have imposed on the customer. Second, failing to comply with the income recognition and asset classification norm, which decides how much interest rate should be given or should be imposed on a particular kind of customer. So there should be a salary slabbing, and in accordance with that, there should be a slabbing of the interest rate accordingly in proportion to the salaries. Now, the broader concern is not just about the NBFCs misbehaving, but also about the concerns regarding the digital lending atmosphere in the India, both legal ones and the illegal ones that are reportedly engaging in, first, predatory loan pricing, and second, the harsh recovery practices. Because we have got the word of NBFCs, we will very quickly look into the concept of what is NBFCs, the non-banking financial companies, and how are they different from banks. Let's learn it like that. Both banks and NBFCs can give you loans, but when you come to them and ask for creating a demand deposit, the NBFCs will reject you because they cannot accept the demand deposit. Therefore, they cannot issue the checks, you cannot withdraw the checks, therefore, you cannot create current account, saving account, etc., which can be done in the case of banks. Now, why NBFCs are not allowed to hold your money? That is because they work without holding a banking license, which is granted to the banks under the Banking Regulation Act of 1949. Whereas, because it's an NBFC, C for company, therefore it is regulated and incorporated under the Companies Act of 1956 and 2013 respectively. Now, because the NBFCs are not regulated by the Banking Regulation Act, therefore there is no need for them to maintain the deposits with RBI, for example, the cash reserve ratio, the SLR, statutory liquidity ratio, etc. Whereas it is mandatory for the banks to store that, and therefore limited amount of foreign investment is allowed for the banks, which is only up to 74%, whereas in the case of NBFCs, 100% of foreign investment is allowed. Having understood that, now let's move on to the main topic, which is the digital lending scenario in India. What is digital lending? It is nothing but the process of availing the credit online, which is becoming the more popularly resorted option these days because of the following features. First of all, the increased smartphone penetration, which allows you the access of internet, allows you the access of these digital lending apps. Second is the credit range flexibility from 2,000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees. There is a huge range through which the credit can be availed. So it's a very popular option, especially among the new age customers. Then the online transactions are very speedy because of the internet and the technology advancements. And this is also based on the buy now and pay later model, the classic EMI model, through which purchasing a product at that moment doesn't seem like a liability. It might turn into a liability in the longer term, but it harnesses the human attitude of instant gratification. So therefore, these are the popularly increasing options for availing credit in India. But what are the need to regulate digital lending platforms in India? So while you understand the essential features, please have a read into them using the handout description. I will move on to the regulations and why there is a need to regulate the digital lending in India. First and foremost is because there is a lot of illegal lending happening through these apps in India. You will be surprised to know that RBI in its 2022 report has highlighted that India has got the largest market, in fact the maximum number of DLAs, digital lending apps. And out of those also, we have got 600 of them which are working in illegal fashion, which means the highest number of working illegal DLAs are also belonging to India. So while we are getting huge benefits and customization from these apps, if they are illegal, then we are entering into danger zone. Second is, these illegal lending apps, they actually target the most marginalized section of the India, the financial unsavvy and the low income Indians who are in dire need of the penny credits, but at the same time they are not technologically or they are not financially sound to assess the extortative terms and conditions and to analyze the interest rate that will be incurred on them and whether it is fair also, rational also or not. Next, it also therefore leads to harassment by the recovery agent. Many of us have heard about those instances where somebody around us who've taken a credit card access or credit card loan gets harassed very frequently by the credit card agencies or by the agents. This also in many sad cases leads to suicide, because in extreme cases it also leads to data encroachment, it leads to sexual harassment, and therefore last year it was reported that about six people died or committed suicide because of the harassment that were caused by these recovering agents. And then the second one is about the data privacy. Just at one click, you are giving not just your Aadhaar number but your PAN card data as well, because you are availing a credit, a financial service. So while it might seem like, why are they giving us such a good deal, such a good amount of loan at such a small prices, it is actually more better for them, more beneficial for them as compared to us. The reason for this is very simple. At one click, you are availing just let's say 1,000 rupees and they are availing your entire financial information. Therefore, they can also misuse it for furthering up the financial crimes against you. And last but not the least, it is also acting as a tool for money laundering, because think about it. It is also highlighted though by an ED data last year that most of the money, most of the dating apps, most of the credit lending or these DLA apps, the revenues that they have generated, the crores of revenues were actually repatriated to China. So this is actually a classic case of money laundering happening through the DLA apps. So because of these grave concerns, RBI has gone very active for regulating these apps, and at the same time we would be requiring certain governmental interventions and the given way forward, which are, first of all, to have a centralized agency or department which will control the entire DLA ecosystem. So this nodal department has already been declared, and it is none other than the Central Bank of India, which is the RBI. And in 2022's August, RBI has already issued the first set of guidelines for digital lending to ensure ethical digital lending. Not only that, there has been multi-agency crackdown on the illegal loans app as well. And this is headed and pioneered by the Finance Ministry of India. Finance Ministry of India has asked the RBI to prepare a white list of all the legal loan apps. Now, these white listed apps will only be available on the app stores as directed to the MeitY, or the Ministry of Electronics and IT. By whom? By the Finance Ministry. So we can see that multiple agencies are working for the crackdown of these illegal loan apps. Then registration of payment aggregator. What are payment aggregator? So all these merchants or all these loan apps are getting regulated by a third party, are getting regulated, are getting funded, and are getting formalized, operationalized by a third party, which is known as a payment aggregator. Who's going to put mandates or regulate this payment aggregator? RBI again. And RBI has got very strict norms for registration of these payment aggregators. So there has to be a set deadline within which the payment aggregator have to get registered with RBI. So please remember, we have got provisions for payment aggregator as well. And then we should be creating a public repository for digital lending app, which means in the RBI website only, the white list of the good apps that they have created, the legit apps that they have created, should be visible on their website for public disclosure, so that if I want to lend from digital mode, I will prefer these apps over the ones which have not been enlisted over here. So public disclosure will enhance the transparency and will also enhance the public awareness. Okay, now here is a mains practice question for you. We have to analyze the key features and benefits from the DLAs or DLPs and analyze the risk associated with the same, suggest measures to mitigate them. Also, do not forget to write down the government initiatives taken in this regard. Now, the Parliamentary Standing Committee has enlisted a very important topic for the upcoming deliberations of the year. This is about the Indian Armed Forces preparedness to deal with the hybrid warfare, or what we also call as the non-kinetic warfare. So the first question first, what do we mean by a kinetic warfare, and how is a non-kinetic warfare different from it? Kinetic warfare is when, in order to combat the threat, military employs deployment of weapons. So it is the weapon which makes any war front kinetic. And what is non-kinetic? It is deploying of multiple other strategic tactics. So which means the warfare is not just on the weapon front or on the military front, but also on the front of politics. So there could be a political warfare, there could be a technological warfare, military warfare, economic warfare, psychological warfare, and social warfare, all of them deployed together to disrupt and disable the opponent's action without dwelling into direct hostilities with them. So this is a new kind of emerging warfare, and we would want to assess whether Indian Army is ready for that or not. So the growing danger of non-kinetic warfare have been highlighted from the recent Russia, Ukraine and Israel-Palestine conflicts, both of which have, by the way, deployed the non-kinetic warfares at large scale. For example, the recent pager blast in Lebanon deployed by Israel, the Mossad of Israel. So this is nothing but an example of non-kinetic warfare only, but caused large-scale destruction. Here is the definition provided for the non-kinetic warfare. You can watch this out in the handout, and it also tells us that the stakeholders in this kind of warfare are not just military personnel, but they also involve civil society organizations. They also involve the non-military stakeholders, and they can turn out to be more deadlier than the kinetic warfare or the traditional warfare techniques. Now you could be asked about the characteristics of a hybrid warfare or a non-kinetic warfare. The first one is its multi-dimensionality, because it attacks not only from one front, one dimension, but across multiple dimensions. For example, creating propaganda around disinformation, or to misuse the existing social conditions of the society. For example, if communalism is going on, separatist tendencies are going on, they try to exploit that in order to get advantage. Next is technological. Data piracy can be done, cyber espionage can be done, then psychological warfares through fears, through propagandas, etc. Cyber attacks can be done, cultural and social manipulation. There can be law warfare as well. There can be sanctions and economic warfare, for example, disrupting the supply chain operations or inducing the counterfeited currency into that particular market to hurt that country's economy. So it is multi-dimensional, multi-domain in approach. So do you know an example of it? So back in 2006, when Israel and Lebanon were having a war against each other, Lebanon and its militant Hezbollah, they actually deployed not just propaganda, but also cyber warfare against Israel. They also attacked its critical infrastructure, created a lot of cyber espionage systems, along with using guerrilla tactics and certain social media tactics to demean the efforts of the Israeli military. Second one came in the form of maximum damage and minimum effort kind of agenda. So this agenda leads to creation of proxy groups. So you know that Hezbollah, Houthi rebels, Hamas, they're actually funded by Iran to a very larger extent. So Iran is not getting into direct war, but actually creating a lot of proxies. This also happened in the case of the Russian annexation of Crimean Peninsula in Ukraine. So Russia actually did not deploy a lot of military at that time, but actually attacked their critical infrastructure, deployed a lot of sleeper cells that I will be discussing later. And with the help of those small proxies and those kind of multi-dimensional attack, it was able to annex the entire Crimean Peninsula without making any large-scale military attack. So therefore, second characteristic is believes in the philosophy of maximum damage with minimum effort. Second is deploying the non-state actors, deploying the overground workers. For example, the radicalized youth of Kashmir back at that times. Then we have got civil society organization which Ajit Doval's cause as the fourth frontier of war, very easily radicalized, very easily manipulated, or certain other radicalist, extremists, or terrorists for that matter, or Naxalist, who can perpetrate their cause. So certain non-state actors are also deployed. For example, the NGOs who were getting funding from the foreign government in India, recently banned in India. So what have been the recent usage cases? We can see Israel-Palestine, currently it is going on. Israel-Lebanon war, lot of cyber deployment were done. Cyber espionage, cyber threat, cyber warfare was made by Lebanon on Israel, and now Israel is taking revenge. How? By the pager attacks. So pager attacks were like sleeper cells, and the moment the battery got blasted, it led to the death of a lot of Hezbollah activists. Then in the case of Russia's action in Ukraine, China's unrestricted warfare, all of these can be seen. In this regards, it's very important to assess the threats emanating from the hybrid warfare, which is multifold at very high intensity as compared to the traditional warfare. First of all, it creates cyber attack threat. First of all, your information could be surveillanced. Not only that, it can be misused, data privacy, data breach, data piracy can happen. And these cyber attacks have been a classic example of how the critical infrastructure of India, critical infrastructure of many other important countries have been a threat. Second one is the evolving nature of terrorism. Think about terrorism. It's not just now conducted by terrorists only, but by sleeper cells, but by lone wolf attacks, and also by what we call as the hybrid militants. What are sleeper cells? So sleeper cells could be somebody's neighbor, somebody's best friend, somebody's close friend, who, when gets the command from the main authority, becomes a radical activist and deploys the operation in that particular country. This is a sleeping cell which will become active when the call for action will be commanded to them. So these are the sleeper cells. These are generally the spies, or these are generally the terrorists working in this regards. So these are the sleeper cells. Then the lone wolf attack, which has led to assassination of many important leaders, where a single person comes and then blasts himself in order to blast the entire crowd around him. Next is hybrid militant. Now hybrid militants are those militants which are the people who have been radicalized enough to carry out the terror strike. But whenever the time gets fainted down, they slip back into their routine life. So you can never actually guess that they are the working terrorists. They are the terrorists on board. They are militants who become active when again they are given the call of action. Similarly, there are overground workers who help these militants. They are nothing but the normal civilians who are running their day-to-day course, but they're actually providing intel information or creating communication channels for hawala, money laundering, or for terrorist activities. Next is it undermines the democracy by manipulating the information, creating propaganda, misusing social media tactics, and therefore they are able to not just manipulate the elections, the vote count, but also can overthrow the entire democracy or the government systems. Next is they bring disinformation and fake news as well, and therefore they can also cause psychological terrors. So if something has the possibility of attacking us from multiple fronts, what could be the best way forward is to combat it again from multiple fronts, and for that, excellent coordination is required across multiple agencies, be it the intelligence agencies or the security agencies. So first of all, and not just of one country, but multinational one. So adopting multinational frameworks is very important. Second, to incorporate certain institutional measures where we are becoming more surveillant, vigilant, and combatant and ready for such multidimensional attacks. That is also very important, and to keep in check whether we are in tune with, let's say, the Rapid Action Response Force is active with us, the surveillance force is active with us, we have already checked the critical infrastructure and the risk assessment has been done regarding it. So all of these things are very important to create institutional robustness. Next is training of the armed forces so that they can be equipped not just for the kinetic threats but also for the non-kinetic threats. Okay. Next is strengthening the democratic institutions. This can be made by making the people more aware, the civil society organizations, which could be the potential fourth front of warfare. When they understand the real awareness, when they understand the difference between the real news and the fake news, or whether they are being radicalized, they themselves strengthen the democratic institutions of the country, therefore fading of the warlike conditions. Next is investing in the journalism, because media is the fourth pillar of democracy, ensuring that the right kind of news reaches the right people, and therefore the extreme radicalization or the fake news propaganda can be beaten to death. Now here is a mains question that we have for you. Kindly try to attempt this, at least create a structure of it so that you know how to answer a particular question. Only through practice, one will become perfect. Now the next editorial has been featured in the Hindu newspaper, and this is about how in terms of innovation and startup ecosystem, India is holding and emerging as a victor, and how we are continuously improving in the Global Innovation Index. So first of all, let's start by counting our achievements. So this editorial begins with the fact that India is emerging as a center of technological and entrepreneurial innovation. Because a decade back, we were ranked in the third quartile, which means in the last 75 rank we were holding, where in the Global Innovation Index, and now we have jumped to the 40th position in the world today. So let's highlight some of the key points, key achievement of India. India today is a top innovative lower middle income economy, ranking first among the 37 lower middle income economies. It is first among the 10 economies in the Central and the Southern Asia. In the current Global Innovation Index, India ranks 40th, and India ranks 5th in providing the information and communication technology services to the world, 6th in venture capital received, 11th in the number of graduates in science and engineering, and 13th in the global corporate R&D investors, not in the funding but in the terms of investors. Now this article is very important for us to assess and correlate it with the first topic that we have read, why we are falling back on, let's say, some of the fundamental sciences, research and development innovations, and not creating work that is Nobel worthy. Now bringing back our attention to this article, from the perspective of startup ecosystem, country has emerged as third largest startup landscape in the world. How many unicorns do we have right now? We have got 111 unicorn startups, and the total number of startups that India has today has grown to 68,000 in 2023 and is likely to grow to about 1,80,000 by 2030. There is also a growing trend of startup, not just in the tier 1 city, which is getting a lot of funding, but also in tier 2 and tier 3 city, which means the inclusion and the receptivity of startup ecosystem is enlarging in India, which is making us see brighter future of the startup and innovation ecosystem. The editor here also highlights the key initiatives responsible for bringing this dynamic change. First and foremost is the robust innovative system that India now is incorporating. First and foremost is that we have got vast knowledge capital. Vast knowledge capital, though that's a different game altogether, that most of them are getting brain drained across different countries. But the dynamic startup landscape is something which is attracting them back in India. Collaborative efforts are there between public and private research entities in many genres, for example, the Tata Research Institute. And then there are certain government initiatives, for example, Nidhi, National Initiative for Developing Harnessing Innovation Program, that provides funding across multiple sectors, be it for agriculture innovation, biotechnological innovation, or space innovation. It provides a centralized funding for innovation, for developing innovation in these sectors. Now, talking about the government-led initiatives, we'll be talking it more in the prelims pointer section, but it highlights that there have been certain initiatives by Department of Science and Tech, by Biotechnology, Atal Innovation Mission is there, and of course, there is policy-driven innovation headed by Niti Aayog across multiple sectors. So not just one sector is getting benefited, multiple sectors. So multiplicity is actually a benefit and advantage for India. So we are bringing innovation not just in railways, but in electric vehicles, biotechnology, nanotechnology, space technology, alternative technology, etc. Now, the notable progress in key indicator has also been seen across multiple domestic industries. So if the industries will grow, their innovative capacity and appetite will also grow. So we can see that with the diversification of these industries, patent origination, protection of patents, exports of cultural and creative services, we are also now standing at an industrial robustness. The editorial also highlights certain instances to justify this. First and foremost is how Niti Aayog and Ministry of Railways has collaborated together to build the fast-track models for redevelopment of railway stations across India in the model of PPP, public-private partnership. This is also shown in the case of pharmaceutical industry, where we are now taking contract manufacturing and clinical trials for the other multinational companies. Why? Because of the growing innovation of our country. Next is, it is also fostering at the grassroots level, something highlighted by the editor, very important. We can see this happening because of deployment of Atal Tinkering Labs at the school level, Atal Incubation Centers for bringing a good and supportive ecosystem for startups. And how many of them have been created? You can see this data from the handout. And when these startups are selected through the Atal New India Challenge, they also get the grant and aid and hand-holding support by the Government of India. Now, both from prelims and mains point of view, we'll be looking into some of the government schemes which are providing support to startup and innovation ecosystem across the multiple stages. Stage 1 is the market entry stage, where a startup has to provide a design prototype or to basically enter with a particular idea. To initiate that or to provide them support for entering the market, there is Startup India Seed Fund Scheme. The next one is the summit level, because one would want to encourage ideas by exchanging of the ideas, by learning from the peers, and this is done through the help of summits. Some of these summits that India organizes is Prarambh. Then there is one startup forum, a collaboration with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where all the participant countries will be given certain funds in order to, and knowledge transfer in order to create innovations and startups in their respective country. Second is the Nidhi scheme. As I've already told you, this is basically to double up the number of incubators in the startup ecosystems for each and every genres, for each and every areas in which it is going to provide the fund. And it's going to provide the fund in the biotechnology field, defense field, electronics field, agriculture field, etc. Next is, to enhance the competitiveness, one would require to rank the performing players. So this is done by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Department of Promotion of Industries and Internal Trade, which provides ranking of states on support to startup ecosystem. So this is also a scheme to support at the state level. Talking about the sectoral level, for biotechnology, we have got BioNest, e-Yuva and Biotech Ignition Grant Scheme. for promoting innovations in the field of biotechnology. This is assisted by Nidhi scheme and directed by BRICS. Okay. Next is the Ministry of Defense, which is now taking up the innovation of Defense Excellence Scheme, the IDEX scheme, something which we've already read in the previous analyst. Next is the Training and Incubation Scheme of NEETI. This is the TIDE scheme. And next one is a mission, National Agriculture Innovation Fund and the associated mission by ICAR, which is responsible for promoting research in the agricultural field. Through this, agri-business incubator centers will also be established. This is how we are trying to promote the startup culture at multiple fronts. Now, this is a question asked in UPSC PYQ 2014. What is a venture capital? And you also try to answer what is the difference between a venture capitalist and an angel investor. In the next article, we will read about the Benami laws in India, as recently Supreme Court has recalled its 2022 judgment on Benami law amendments, where it has declared a certain provision unconstitutional because it has manifested arbitrarily. So we will be talking more about the conceptual part of it, moving on to the topic where we will be reading about the act which gives the power to the government to declare a property as Benami. First of all, what is Benami? In English, it translates to something which is nameless. Let's try to understand it in very interesting fashion. Let's say we have a car parked in an area of Karol Bagh. Now, it is parked in the house of a person named Mantu. But Mantu doesn't know who exactly is the owner of this car. And this car also is not registered in the name of Mantu. But Mantu is very happy that he has this car. This car is a Benami property because it is not registered by anybody's name. Second, let's say this car is registered, but registered under the name of Doraemon. So this is a fictitious character. This character does not exist, but yes, this car is registered under a particular name. In this case also, this car will be called as a Benami property. A Benami property could be a mobile or a movable property like a car, or an immovable property, for example, land, real estate, or any building for that matter. So now, which act gives the legal right to the government to declare a property as Benami? It is the Benami Transaction Prohibition Act of 1988. Why is Benami property a problem? Because it leads to money laundering activities. It leads to corruption. It leads to misappropriation of the fund and can also give way to terrorism in many cases. So overall, very bad for the economy, therefore needs to be countered. First of all, done by the Act of 1988. So it prohibited it under the section 2A. It also, therefore, gave legal right for the termination of any such property which is deemed as Benami. But the problem with this act was that there were no rules to ensure the procedural execution of this legislation, which means it was lacking the procedural clarity, which was then amended through the Act of 2016, which defined almost all the words. First of all, what is a Benami property? What do you mean by Benami transactions? Then, who is a Benami dar? What is the scope of the term of a property? What are the powers of the adjudicating authorities? What leads to the confiscation? And what are the penal consequences for the Benami holder? Now, from the prelims point of view, please listen to it very carefully. What comes under the Benami transaction? So, any property which is held by a person, but the consideration for such property has been provided by another person. So let's say that Mantu is holding this property, but the consideration, the actual booking of this property has been done by Pintu, who is nowhere closely related to Mantu. Okay, next one. Transaction or arrangement in respect of a property carried out is made on a fictitious name. The example we gave of Doraemon. Next one is, if the owner of the property is not aware, or if he denies that he doesn't have the knowledge of the actual ownership, in that case also, this is considered as a Benami property. This is a very important point because this has appeared in UPSC prelims. Now, it is also considered as Benami transaction if it is not, the ownership is not traceable, or if it is fictitious. Having known that, who is a Benami dar? Anybody to whom this property has been transferred or who's currently holding this Benami property. This person now cannot further retransfer the Benami property under some other beneficiary's name. And what is the scope of property? As I've already told you, it could be movable or immovable property. What are the power of authorities? Of course, to do discovery, inspection, enforcing the attendance of the culprit or the Benami holder. Then authority to instruct to produce a book of account, producing and receiving and delivering the affidavits, all of them. And confiscation of Benami property is done by an adjudicated property, but most importantly, it is confiscated not by the state government. It is confiscated by the central government. And what are the penal provisions? If you are found to be holding a Benami property, person shall be imprisoned from 1 to 7 years, and there will be a fine levied up to 25% of the fair market value of that particular property. Why have we discovered this article in great details? Because of this question. In 2017, this question appeared in prelims, and now I believe you will be in a better position to answer this with much clarity without the need of applying any logic or tukka over here. Now, as our Prime Minister will be visiting to Russia on 22nd and 23rd October to attend the BRICS Summit, we will be analyzing this entire multilateral organization, which is BRICS. Now, BRICS is an acronym for a multilateral formal grouping that stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, why these economies gained the traction? Because of a 2021 research paper published by Goldman Sachs, in which it highlighted the great growth potential of the four economies, that is the BRIC economy. It didn't highlight the South Africa back then. Now, this acronym of BRIC was given for the first time by the chief economist of Goldman Sachs, that is Jim O'Neill, and through this community or these countries together got the traction. In G8 Outreach Summit, remember G7 along with Russia is known as G8. When it happened in Petersburg in Russia, it was for the first time when an informal meeting happened between these BRIC countries. In 2009, the first BRIC summit was held formally for the first time again in Russia. And in 2010, South Africa accepted the full membership of BRIC, making BRIC as BRICS. Okay. Then in 2011, South Africa attended its first BRIC summit where in China. This fact is not important, but what is important are the two declarations. First and foremost is the setting up of institution known as the New Development Bank, which happened through the Fortaleza Declaration of 2014 and the UFA Declaration across multiple critical sectors of each other's country and economy that happened in 2015. You might be asked, match the column. Fortaleza Declaration or UFA Declaration is associated with which multilateral grouping? So this one is BRICS. And also the Beijing Declaration, which happened to conclude or to give conclusive talks about the Russia and Ukraine. Currently, a very important development has been made with regards to membership. We know that BRICS comprises of total 5 countries, but now it has recently got expanded to 5 more growing economies. So it stands for having a 10 membered grouping. So these new economies have been Egypt, Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Ethiopia. Please remember, what is very important is that Iran has joined us in the BRICS. Talking about the economic significance, a very important grouping because it holds 45% of the global population, approximately 3.5 billion people. Imagine the number of stakeholders and the amount of engagement it could offer. Second is the economic contribution exceeds $28.5 trillion and accounts for 28% of the total global economic trade. Oil production, if we talk about the newly included members, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE together, they alone account for 44% of the total global crude oil production, which provides for the other countries of the BRICS, the old members, to offer better opportunities to trade the oil for their energy security. Now, how are they cooperating in the terms of economy and finances? First is the development of New Development Bank. This happened in 2014 with the help of Fortaleza Declaration. Here, the stakeholders will be coming together, contributing for the comprehensive development of each other's economy. And also, this is to do away with the dollar-based transactions so that the regional currencies could be used. Second is the creation of contingent reserve arrangement. This question was asked in UPSC. Reserve arrangement to take care of the liquidity crisis. So if any country faces from the balance of payment crisis, then the liquidity support would be provided with the help of contingent reserve arrangement. And there should be an alternative system to the SWIFT payment system, which is dollar dominated. This is the BRICS payment system. It is still underway. This is still under the pipeline. So now we have contingent reserve New Development Bank currently working. Let's see the stakeholding and the quotas which are owned by respective countries. So please remember these two spectrum. It starts from China and ends at South Africa. So China has got maximum amount of funding, stakeholding, or in the sense, and then Brazil, Russia and India have got equal amount of voting, and then there is South Africa which has got the least quota or least stakeholding. Now here is a prelims PYQ asked by the UPSC, which makes us understand how important this topic is. It has been asked not just one time but multiple times, 2016, then 15, then 14, consecutively in 3 years. So with that, we'll move on to the last topic of the day. In this, we are going to talk about a very important statutory body which safeguards the human rights in India. This is the NHRC, National Human Rights Commission. This has been in news because of the celebration of the 31st Foundation Day of the NHRC and its felicitation by Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar. So National Human Rights Commission is not a constitutional body but a statutory body which gets its legal backing from an act of 1993, which is the Protection of Human Rights Act, which makes the mandate easy and clear for us to understand. The mandate is to promote and preserve the human rights in the country. This is in alignment with the Paris Principles adopted in the UNHDR. So in 1991, in order to comply with the Paris Principles, we have adopted what? The Protection of Human Rights Act. The date of inception has been 12th of October 1993. Now, what is the composition of NHRC? This is very important because certain changes have been made due to recent amendments. So it comprises of course, a chairman. It comprises of 5 full-time members and most importantly, 7 deemed members across multiple fields. Now, who can become a chairman of the NHRC? Either a person who has been the Chief Justice of India or has been a judge to the Supreme Court of India. There's no scope of a High Court judge over here. The other 5 permanent members, first of all, is a member who is or has been a judge of the Supreme Court, member who is or has been Chief Justice of the High Court, 3 members to be appointed among the person having knowledge, expertise, especially in the field of human rights, and at least one of them should be a woman. This is also made by an amendment. Now, what about the 7 deemed members? They should be the chairpersons of chief commissioners of either of the following commissions related to backward classes, minorities, SCs, STs, children, women, and persons with disability. So kindly remember them. These statements can be made and manipulated in the prelims examination. Now coming to their appointment, who does the appointment? So appointment is done by a selection committee headed by the Prime Minister of India and also accommodative of the leading house, the presiding officers of both the houses, that is the Speaker of the Lok Sabha and the Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, along with Leader of Opposition again of both the houses, Leader of Opposition of Rajya Sabha and of Lok Sabha, and Minister of Home Affairs. So which minister is there in this committee? That is very important, and please remember it's Minister of Home Affairs. They shall be delivering their service for 3 years till the age of 70 years, and the removal shall be done by whom? By the President of the India, not on arbitrary random grounds but only on the proven grounds of misbehavior or incapacity. And when I'm saying proven, it means that after due inquiry by the Supreme Court, only a person can be removed from this very important commission. This was all about today's analyst discussion. This is the following PYQ that we have to offer and we expect you to be finishing it. So with this, thank you so much. Have a good day till we meet again.